Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of At the Bar. I'm your host, Brad Marshall, and through these conversations, we get to learn a little bit more about health, fitness, and mindset. And today, I'm joined by, as you can see, Steph Simmons, although soon to be Steph Grange once the name changes official. But Steph, thanks so much for taking some time to hang out with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so one of the things we love to do to kick off the session is to have our listeners learn a little bit more about who's on the episode. So I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us as much as you like or as little as you'd like about who you are.
Sure. So I grew up in Hickory, North Carolina, and grew up playing all kinds of sports. I did softball predominantly. That was my main sport. I played volleyball and basketball and all through high school. I have two brothers, Rob and Chuck, and my parents are Chris and Steve. And Rob and Chuck we're all basically a year apart. So we grew up playing sports in the backyard together. Whatever season it was, we do baseball, wiffle ball in the backyard. We play football, soccer, all the kinds of things. So very much a tomboy growing up with my two brothers, and then the rest of the kids on the block were mainly guys. So all of our same ages. And so we had a really good childhood growing up playing outside. And then after high school, I went to Wingate University. I played softball for the college there on scholarship. So we were Division II, and got my bachelor's in biology from Wingate. And then after that, I moved home for a year, lived in Hickory, worked for a company called Equipment Limited before I moved on and decided to go get my master's. So that's when I moved to Wilmington in 2014 to get my master's in marine biology with, I studied jellyfish down here. And I have since lived in Wilmington. So that's 7 years now. So now I'm here at CrossFit Reignited in Wilmington.
Well, that's awesome. I love how people have similar journeys, grew up playing sports in a family that sounds really active. You were able to take that to the college level and then beyond. I'm curious to hear, what was that like having a couple brothers in a neighborhood full of boys as you were growing up and playing sports and competing?
There's no mercy. You were always playing some type of sport. You were never playing dolls. You were never, rarely playing dress up.
Mhm.
But a lot of times we were outside. My mom would lock us out. She'd lock the doors to clean the house or whatever the heck she was doing, probably just taking a break from us. And so we played outside all the time. We
Mhm.
played cops and robbers. We'd play any sport. We'd go hide in the woods, always looking for trouble. But it was always fun with the boys because it was just playtime all the time. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I come from a family of number of brothers, so yeah, I can relate to being outside and having fun. And that's grown up how you learned about sport and movement and things like that. So I'm kind of curious then, at a young age, had a chance to play a variety of sports. How did you get into them? Was it something that mom and dad just signed you up for the local sports, in the city, or were there some that you gravitated towards and wanted to get involved in, or how did that work out?
So I think my mom actually gave me the choice of like, you can either do gymnastics or dance or cheerleading or whatever the other general options are for kids at like the age of 5, I think.
Mm.
So I started with gymnastics and I liked that. It was the most active to me, it seemed like. And so I started there and with classes, and I think I went once a week and really enjoyed it. Was pretty good at it, and probably from that fearless nature of like growing up with boys. So just throw yourself headfirst into something. And so I got pretty good at gymnastics, and they wanted me to be on their competitive team. But I was really, really little, and most of the team was tall, like middle school, high schoolers, and I'm like running around on the gymnastics floor. I'm like, they're huge. This is scary. And so that didn't work. We took a step back. And then I think I joined team sports at that point, specifically with like Optimist softball or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Met a bunch of other girls my age and started playing on a travel team. So we started playing travel softball at age 10 and under with the
Mhm.
hit and run. Um, and I stayed with that same group of girls all the way through 16 and under travel ball. And then I switched over from the hit and run, which was like our local travel team. We played in tournaments. Like I grew up in Hickory, so we played in Statesville and sometimes Charlotte. So we weren't traveling usually more than an hour away from home. And then at 16 and under, we decided we were pretty good at this. And so jumped ship to a different team called the Lady Blues, which was based out of Charlotte. So now we're traveling like an hour for practice and we're
Mm,
traveling to much further regional competitions. Like we traveled to Raleigh and then we ended up moving up to the 18 under team where now we're talking about getting recruited. And so we started traveling to Florida and to Texas and Colorado. And now you're playing in front of lots and lots of college scouts. And it was just a huge transition all the way from local team sports through like kind of regional travel sports all the way up to, okay, now this is serious and you have to perform on a stage if
yeah,
you want to go to college. So
yeah,
it's quite a long, lot of years of traveling and a lot of years of putting in effort into a sport.
yeah. Was there a certain point in time that you remember that you really went all in on softball? So it's growing up, you said gymnastics, played a variety of other sports, maybe just in the neighborhood. But do you remember, was there a point in time where you're like, hey, I really feel like I'm pretty good at this. I have the potential to be really good at this. I'm going to go all in on just this one sport. Or did you continue to mix other sports in while you were doing the travel ball?
So I always played volleyball and basketball through high school. I think
Okay.
I only, yeah, I didn't play volleyball my senior year in high school, but every other year I played all those sports, all every season of the school year. But on top of that, I also played travel ball during the summer and during the spring and the fall. And it was really, I think when that transition from the hit and run, which was the local team, when I transitioned to the Lady Blues in the 16 and under league, that's kind of when I was like, okay, you're decent at softball. Like, let's go this route and see what can come of it. And my dad was a huge key player in that. He was my coach from hit and run days all the way up through the Lady Blue days. And he would drive me to practices every week. And he was always there at every tournament and just my right hand man that gave me everything I needed to succeed in that aspect of life.
Yeah, it's amazing how having a great support system, coaches, family, significant others, play such a pivotal role in our ability to perform. So, worked your way through high school, got to college, played on scholarship. I always find it really fascinating to hear what that experience is like when you go from playing a sport, spending so much time, energy, and effort, to now transitioning into life beyond sport. So maybe take us through a little bit of what that looked like from, a health and fitness perspective. Is there things you did to stay active? Did you kind of get away from, formal movement, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So after playing college softball was more like a job. We had a lot longer practices. We had
Mhm.
weightlifting. You had to keep up your grades. And so it honestly wasn't as much fun as playing growing up and going to different tournaments because that was like a trip. You got to go somewhere. It was exciting. It was fun. You get to see your friends. And then when you got to college, it was a lot different. And I definitely transitioned from being like the big fish in the small pond in high school to like this tiny little fish and everybody's good. And
Yeah.
now you're all on the same playing field and you're all working very hard for, limited spots. I think we had 21 on the roster. So I worked my butt off in college to try to earn a starting spot. And there were kind of I didn't have a great experience. There were a lot of politics involved.
Mm-hmm.
I was never like enabled to get fully confident in a position. I moved around as like a second baseman. I was a catcher. I moved from second base to right field to left field to DH and never was able to like get good at one thing.
Hmm.
So after I stopped playing in my junior year of college. And so that's kind of when that transition to, like, we called it the NARP life, like non-athletic regular person.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's when I transitioned to a NARP, and it was really hard. Not having like a group of people to
Mhm.
push you along athletically on a day-to-day basis. So I found a couple of buddies. All of my friends at Wingate were athletes. We all were on different teams. So my good group of friends, like two of them played football, two played volleyball, one is a golfer, one played tennis. So we all kind of had different training regimens. And so when everybody stopped playing, when their final season was over and we all became NARPs, then we just kind of worked out together. And so we'd go to the fitness center and do whatever workout. But then after college, you're on your own and your friends aren't there to help you train. And so I'd go to like whatever the local gym was and
Mhm.
ride the elliptical for 20 minutes, get super bored, stop, maybe do some abs, maybe do some like glute bridges, and then go home and be like, what did I actually accomplish here?
Yeah.
And so one of my friends that I was working with at the time, Alex, took me to the CrossFit gym in Hickory.
Mhm.
And that's when I was like, oh, wow, this is intense. This is kind of like my training sessions back at Wingate. And so I stuck around and started taking classes at CrossFit Hickory. And there were some really, really good coaches there that taught us great fundamentals early on, and just really fell in love with the more like competitive nature of CrossFit. You could
Mm.
go to a class, you could learn, but you could also compete with every other person in the class. And it really motivated you to get better.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I transitioned from like team sports, organized team sports, into the CrossFit realm.
Yeah, I can certainly see that thread of competition, from a young age with the family into the more formal competing high school, college. And when that's taken away, it can really leave us wondering what are we supposed to do, and then finding that in CrossFit. So when you first started to go to Hickory and noticing that sort of competitive side, what would you say was your primary like goal or reasoning for going to CrossFit? Was it to stay in shape, just personally? Was it to look a certain way? Was it to, hey, I really enjoy the competing and looking at the whiteboard? Was it a combination of it, or how would you say that your CrossFit journey started?
I think kind of all of that. I think
Mhm.
predominantly I needed to work out. I was gaining weight because I was eating like a crazy person right out of college, and um, also not moving quite as much. And so that was kind of like the motivating factor. But then when I got there, it was more of, wow, these people are fun and this is a good way to work out. And I
Mhm.
get to meet new people, all different ages. And I met one of my really good friends, Carrie Billington, who at the time was Carrie Shaper, but she and I have competed since, I don't know, like 2000 and God, when did I graduate? 2013. So probably since 2014, she and I have competed at local competitions and big competitions like Wadapalooza together.
Mhm.
And so once I met her, I'm like, all right, well, this is my good buddy. And so now I'm going to show up to class with you every day. And um, once we kind of learned all the fundamentals, I think I got thrown into the Iron Clash. That was my first ever competition. That was down in Fayetteville. I think Nate Schrader was the guy who owned and operated that gym at the time. Um, but I did it scaled, and I remember how hard a 65-pound bar was to snatch. Like,
Mm.
remember almost crying after that event because I was just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Just a power snatch. I was like, why is this so hard? Watching everybody else in the heat, just like touch and go in 65 pounds.
Yep.
And then I'm over here like one, staring around. Whoa, one. So it's kind of fun to like see the progression over time. But
Mhm.
um, after that competition, I learned, okay, I like this. I like these. I like the different events. I like the intensity and
Mhm.
kind of all the emotion that comes with competing. And so I just kept training and doing more competitions.
Yeah. I'm curious when you talked about that transition and having new movements, something like the snatch. Similarly, I had never learned what that was growing up and playing sport even through college. So were there certain movements or certain things that as you transitioned into the CrossFit life, you're like, this is a whole new world of fitness that I've never known because we never did this even as a collegiate athlete? Anything that stands out to you of like movements that you really enjoyed or loved or were like, this is a cool new way to think about movement and how we can perform?
I loved all the gymnastic stuff, so I caught
Mm,
on really well to all of it, like, had a bar muscle up pretty early on, had all the pull-ups because of that early gymnastics training that I had as a kid.
yeah.
So I knew what a hollow body was. I knew, "Oh, okay, this is how I'm supposed to get into a hollow body now from a hanging position." And so that came really natural. But all the barbell movements, all the strength was not there. I
Mm,
was really surprised that even in college, we did like some squats, but we never really touched a barbell. And then, oh, you want me to snatch this or you want me to clean and jerk a barbell? What? How do I do this? And so
yeah.
that was a much steeper learning curve. So I remember the Ollie lifts were hard to catch on to at first. And then just building general strength has always been the primary goal for me since the start. You think I'd be a lot stronger at this point in time, but still a work in progress. So
Yeah, I feel like that's always one of the most frustrating things as a coach to try and relay to your athletes is that strength takes so long to
so
build.
long.
Like we can help you get some of the gymnastics movements or body weight movements a lot faster, but some of that raw strength takes a little while to build over time. And so I'm curious then, it sounds like very early on when you found CrossFit, you got the competitive bug and met some folks who allowed you to compete. And that sounds like that's kind of been a theme in your CrossFit career so far is constant competition. When you think about goals, aspirations, or intentions that you have when it comes to CrossFit, what would you say are the ones that stand out to you most at this point in time in your CrossFit journey?
I want to go back to the games.
Mm,
That's number one.
yeah.
So I'm 30 now and just got married. So like life things are starting to happen. But for me, I want 2 more seasons to try to get back to the games and then like maybe start to think about having a family of my own. Um, so I'm going to be a little bit selfish for 2 more seasons, but that's the ultimate goal. I do like to set smaller goals along the way because I don't have the individual mindset of like, I can train all year round to do
Mhm,
really well and focus on just training for the games. That it doesn't work because I get caught up in the day to day of like, I don't want to lift and do all these squats today. I don't feel
mhm,
like eating chicken and rice today. Like, gonna go eat Taco Bell and I just don't want to work out. So for me, having that like straightforward, that's probably why it takes me forever to gain strength, but having that straightforward path to get to the games that you need doing 2 sessions a day doesn't work.
mhm,
So I like having competitions along the way, like doing Crash Crucible in the fall last year was really great because that was super difficult. I didn't get to do it this year because of the wedding, but that was a pretty high level competition in the fall, which was a good like benchmark. And then you have the Open and Wadapalooza kind of early in the year, and then now we have quarterfinals and semifinals. But these are all like little benchmarks that keep me
mhm.
accountable and keep me progressing towards that part of the season throughout the year. I know a lot of like your top athletes, they'll train straight through all of those, like they're not even happening with the intention of peaking at the games. I kind of do a lot of little peaks for competitions throughout the year, and
Yeah,
it keeps it fun.
yeah, and I was gonna say, I think, that strategy aligns really well with what we know of how people can continue progressing consistently. We might have this big outcome goal, make it to the games, lose a certain amount of weight. And if all we're focused on is just that, we can get lost in the day to day of like, what are the small little decisions and behaviors that are going to help us get there? So breaking it up, chunking it into different blocks throughout the year sort of helps us stay focused and present on what we're doing, but also gives us those little rewards along the way, which is a really great strategy. A couple other things that you said that I think we're going to dive into. But before we get to those, I am curious because you did say, you did have a chance to make it to the CrossFit Games. So what I would say the pinnacle for the sport, both on the individual and on the team side. So maybe talk us through a little bit about what that experience was like, getting a chance to go to Madison, compete on a team against, the other best teams in the world in this sport. What was your experience like?
Oh my God, it was so fun. It was the most incredible athletic experience I have ever had, all the way around the board from
Yeah,
like check in, where we got to go through the Noble like locker rooms that they set up for us. That was so cool. They had this
you probably
big,
have
like,
enough gear to
uh,
last you a lifetime now.
oh my God, they gave us so much stuff. I had like 10 pairs of shoes. I've never had that many pairs of shoes just for training at one
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
Um, but they had this incredible locker room set up, and we could go in and try on like each pair of clothing that they wanted us to have. They gave us like, I don't know, 6 sports bras and 7 shorts and all that kind of stuff. But you got to go in and try on a sports bra, try on a pair of shoes, make sure it fit. They had tailors on site if it didn't, so they could immediately alter it and get you set up and feeling comfortable in their apparel, so that way you could perform your best. So that was really neat on day one when we checked in, and then competing at the games is just next level. Like, it's a huge emotional roller coaster. Like, you get excited about the events you're doing, you get anxious because you're warming up and getting ready to do the event that's going to be really difficult and hurt. And then you're doing the event and it flies by and it's really hard. And then at the end, you come back down that hill and now you're at the bottom, like, okay, just chill. It's all over.
Mhm.
And then 2 hours later, you amp back up and do it again. And it's like that all weekend.
Yeah.
But it is so fun because you walk around the warm up area and the athlete areas, and there's just like big name athlete, big star all over the place. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh, this is really cool. I'm here with them. And
Yeah.
the judges and the volunteers and everybody on staff is just super helpful, and they're there for you for whatever you need. You could walk up to some random stranger with a volunteer shirt on and say, I need water right now. And they would run and go find you that.
Mm.
So that's really cool. And then we had a ton of family and friends from the gym travel to Madison to be there. And so it was just really neat finishing a workout and looking up in the Coliseum stands and just seeing your whole group right there cheering you on. So it was just an incredible experience. It pushed me to way new limits. I worked harder than I ever did leading up to the games and then at the games for those 3 other teammates and for myself. And it was just really cool. So I definitely want to go back and experience that again.
Yeah, I could see, from your facial expressions as well as hearing your voice of how awesome of an experience that is. And what I think is really cool is when you look at, the body of work that it took to get there, it's impressive in and of itself. I'm actually very curious to hear about the things you learned along that competitive journey that you think helped prepare you for that weekend. You talked about the emotional roller coaster that you go through. I mean, even just getting there, I know the experience in the semifinal was unique, and then getting that opportunity to fill in the role. So, as you think about your journey as a competitive athlete, what are some of the things that stand out to you that have helped you to be able to perform your best when it matters most to you on the big stage?
Yeah, experience.
Mm,
Um, I was on 2 regional teams with CrossFit Reignited. So I came over to Reignited in 2017. They were putting together a 6-person regional team.
mhm,
And so I was on that team and I learned a lot. I was still a little baby in CrossFit, and like gymnastics was my strong suit. That's what I brought to the team. But I learned a lot about how to communicate with a pretty large group of people exercising fast. So, like, how to move 6 people on a worm and
mhm,
what communication is needed and how, like, at that point in time, my job was more of like a following position. I was learning. So if we were doing work with the worm, my job was get over, get down on burpees, or make sure you had the worm to your shoulder before it went over. It was very much a following role. I
mhm,
listened to the commands and the communication that was coming from our team captains, and those repetitive calls stuck in my head. And so the next year we went as a 4-person team. It was a completely different group of people. So you're learning again how to move in sync with someone, how to match their pace, when their red line is, and where, how much you can push and pull from that. And so I've done that with a lot of different teams, and I've learned, how you communicate with people, how you read their body language mid workout, and where you guys can make up ground based off of your strength and weaknesses. So when we started training with a new group, this 4-person team for this past year's CrossFit Games season, we made it to the MAC. And again, now we're starting to do this new team training process of learning the strengths and weaknesses of each of your fellow athletes and figuring out who should push and who should pull, and how we can work together as a group of 4. And so I went from having this, I was a follower, I was following my team captains, to this year where I was the team captain and I was in charge of keeping our group on pace, keeping the calls consistent when we were on the worm, figuring out what combinations of people worked best for which workouts. And so I guess the experience of having done this in a regional setting before helped us at the semifinals to clinch the spot, even though it was kind of it was backfilled. But we had success on the worm because we have a worm at Reignited and we practiced with that. And whenever you're moving large, heavy, awkward objects quickly with 4 people, you have to have that communication piece. And so we practiced a lot leading up to the semifinals, and then a lot more from semifinals to the games, just making sure we were always in sync. And I think that was a large success for us, just being able to execute the worm well, because for
Mhm.
our semifinal, it showed up in 3 of the 6 workouts. So that was like a strength of ours.
Yeah, and you highlighted this idea of experience, and we know that's the best way to build confidence if we want to make sure we're prepared and then able to execute day of. And you got a lot of that experience in the years leading up, and then in the very short time frame leading up, especially when it comes to certain movements like the worm. You really highlighted it and talked about this idea of, I would almost call it social intelligence, being able to read and understand what your teammates are doing, how they're feeling in the moment, and then adjusting or adapting what's going on in the moment to be the best that you can be. How would you say that you've learned, or how did you cultivate that skill set? Because I think that's what makes team competition so much more unique than individual. Or individual, I just have to worry about myself. Whatever I got to do to get myself ready and perform, that's it. But in a team setting, you're getting yourself ready, but now you're also interacting with 3 or 5 other people. And now we have to figure out how to do this thing together. So, how would you say you've built that skill of social intelligence, understanding what your teammates are going through and how to best help them in the moment?
That is a really good question. I think it started really early on with softball. So I was a catcher, so I was in charge. One of my favorite things was calling pitches.
Mhm.
I just really enjoyed having a good pitcher who could throw to her target, but me dictating what she was throwing, and then we'd strike somebody out or make them look silly at bat because we work together as a team to make the best combination against the other team. Um, and so and being intelligent with the approach that we were taking
Mhm.
against a certain batter helped, but also like knowing your teammates. So I grew up catching Julia Wakefield. She was our hit and run pitcher, and she would get in her head a lot. And so I would call timeout and go to the mound, and I would go tell her blonde jokes. Just anything to, like, she was super blonde. Just go tell her anything to make her stop thinking about what she was throwing or how bad the game was going or how good the game was going. Mainly it was bad if I was going to talk to her, but get her to get her mind away from it. And so that changed her mindset, and then she could then focus back in on what she was doing, and it generally helped. And
Mhm.
so I learned early on that each person had a different style and each person had a different thing that helped them perform their best.
Yeah.
So for Julia, it was telling jokes. For other pitchers, it might have been like, I don't know, just take a breath, do something different. Like, everybody has their own thing. And so when I started doing team competitions with CrossFit, It's the same principle. Like everybody has a thing that makes them tick. Like some people you need to yell at, get your head out of your ass and let's go. We're going to work harder on these burpees.
Hmm.
Some people need to be like, okay, I hear you breathing hard over there. Like, let's take 5 seconds, take a deep breath, and then we're going to keep going. And so you just got to learn your teammates. You got to learn how they operate and what makes them work best. And then, keep that in your head when you're dying.
Yeah.
When you're dying, like remember, okay, they are over there too dying. How can we make everybody work well? And I think this past season we were so successful because all four of us are pretty aerobic competitors. We were
Mm,
pretty good at doing the burpees, doing the running. I'm not slow, but I was by far the slowest person on our team this
mm,
year. And so, like, anytime a running workout comes out, I'm like, dang it, like, I'm going to get my butt kicked in training again. But it
yeah.
was good because, as a team captain, like I'm not having to look around and see, oh, somebody's dying on burpees. No, that person is me. So I just knew if I could keep moving, then the rest of my teammates were there. I just had to look at them with different skill things or different weights, and make sure that I was in charge of the calls and doing really well when we had to move together. So I think that's what made our group of four so strong this year was that as a captain, I was also not having to, slow somebody else down, um, because I saw another teammate dying. They were just really good,
Mm,
good
yeah.
teammates. So,
Yeah. I love the connections and stories there. And it makes a lot of sense, coming as a catcher in charge of the 8 other fielders on the diamond and making sure everybody knows where they're supposed to be. But learning at that young age that everybody does operate a little bit differently, I think is really something that has stuck with you. It sounds like both on the team side, I'm guessing as a coach in the CrossFit space as well. And the application of that, I think, is what is a big takeaway for me is figuring out, all right, how does each person operate individually? And now what do I get to do to make sure they're matching that? So I am curious from your perspective, we've got this concept like the ideal competitive self, how you operate when it's actually go time. They say stand by, they say 3, 2, 1. What is the headspace, the physical nature that you want to be in when it comes to competing for you personally?
I get really anxious before
Mm,
workouts,
okay.
get those butterflies. My heart rate gets super high. So I have to take a deep breath, really try to calm the heart rate down a little bit right before that 3, 2, 1.
Hmm.
And then I've found lately that one rep, just get one rep, like
Mm,
one rep at a time. Okay. I've done one snatch. Okay. Next snatch. Like just focusing on the present moment and trying to do the best rep that I can in the next 10 seconds, whatever that may be. Like one
mhm.
thing at a time, progress. Don't think about, oh my God, I have to do 90 snatches. No, you have to do one, and then you're going to do one more and one more and so on. But I think that's helped me be successful in competition is focusing on the task at hand, not necessarily the bigger picture, because you could suck at one event. You could be absolutely awful. But it doesn't matter. It's going to go in the scorebook. And then the next event, you have to go out there and do the same. You have to compete again. And so if you're still back there worrying about the next event or the last event and you're not focusing on what you're doing, you could just make unnecessary mistakes.
Yeah. I think that experience of having anxiety before an event, whether you want to call it excitement, nervousness, it's pretty much the same experience. It's the stress response of knowing that something we value is on the line and we're about to jump into it. The second piece that you highlighted there, this idea of being present, being focused on just what's right in front of me, whether that's focusing on the technique, the rep, whatever it might be. I think that's one of the most powerful tools athletes can use to try and help them be successful. Is that something that you have trained or formally trained, whether it's a mindfulness, meditation practice? Is it just something that's been cultivated over time? You understood as a batter in softball, I have to focus on this pitch. How did you come to find that that is the best strategy for you, staying present, focusing on just this rep that's right in front of me?
Probably experience.
Okay.
As a batter, I wasn't great. I'd like to think I was, but no. I didn't have the best batting average. And a lot of times I would let like other thoughts creep into my head at bat. And then that just generated negativity in my head. And next thing
Yeah.
you know, you're hitting a dribbler or you're popping it up. And so having that in your head is never helpful. And so over time through CrossFit, I don't know, think about like a snatch. If you're in the getting ready to max your snatch and there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of people watching you. And it's so technical that if you're not focusing on what you're doing and you're looking at the crowd or you're looking at the photographer who's 2 inches from your face, like then you're going to miss. And so I think we've done a little bit of training in the past 2 years. Programs have just started saying, hey, you're on a time limit and you have a 30-second window to hit this lift, go
Mhm.
do it. And so, kind of putting the competition pressure on, but also individually knowing, all right, really focus, get your chest up, finish your pull, punch out. Like these are things that I tell myself before I go lift. And so, I think that that's helpful just having that repetitive, I don't know, thing that you say to yourself before you go in. Like I'm always constantly telling myself, eyes up, chest up,
Yeah.
all the time. So,
I love that, and I think that's how most folks come to figure out how they operate best in the moment is experience, trying different things out, whether it's in the training session, simulating a competition, or like you said, you've gotten a chance to do local competitions that you use as a barometer to build up to the big goal. And something that I like that you said too, when it comes to techniques for staying present, is being very specific and concise in what we tell ourselves. And for something like an Olympic lift, very technical, we just want two easy cues that are we can repeat to ourselves, and that helps us go into it. Other events, maybe it's something a little bit more emotionally focused or how we want to be, but I love that technique of simple, concise cues that we can tell ourselves right before we step into that moment, and that helps put our attention where we'd like it to be. So I think those are some great
yeah.
tips that we
And
can
definitely
certainly.
that chest up cue. I think that honestly, that helps everybody.
Yeah,
Unless you're just really good in the bottom of your squat, like think chest up before you go. And that is the best thing you can do to set yourself up for success.
yeah, I love that. And one of the things I'm curious as we make a little bit of a pivot here, and I love hearing all the different competitive pieces of how you've come to find you operate your best. When we start looking at the daily habits, pulling from a little bit earlier, you said, it's hard to consistently want to show up to the gym, put 2 a days in, eat chicken and rice, do those little things that move us along. So, what have you found to be helpful when it comes to your habits, your behaviors, your decisions that align with this big goal of, hey, I want to make it to the games, but that's not going to start for another probably 3 or 4 months. So, what am I doing to lead up to that? What have you found to be helpful for those daily consistent behaviors?
Being prepared, making a plan. I really like lists, like making
Ah,
lists of things. So if it's a daily list of like, this is my schedule, these are the tasks that I have to do today and get accomplished, that helps me stay on track. If I know I've got 4 clients and 4 hours of training and other tasks like laundry or whatever else it may be, like if I say, okay, from 8 to 9 you have these clients, but from 9 to 10 you've got to train and do your back squats, and then from 10 to 11 you have another client, and then you're going home for lunch and you got to do lunch, laundry, and get dinner ready or whatever that may be. Like having that precise like schedule really helps me stay focused and helps me stay successful with the things that I have to get accomplished. Right now it's a lot more relaxed because I'm not training for anything major. I should be getting ready for Wadapalooza, but the wedding just happened and I'm still all crazy. But
yeah.
normally I like very regimented schedule. I like list,
Mhm.
very specific tasks to accomplish.
Yeah, being prepared, probably the number one way that we can set ourselves up for success, looking forward to things a day, 2 days, a week before they actually occur to make sure we're actually putting ourselves in a position to make those good decisions that we like, that we know we need to. So it's nice to hear that you've got a system that works for you, whether it's the list method. Some people love the phones, putting their to-do list in there, whatever that might be. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned, this idea of getting ready for Wadapalooza or other qualifiers. You just had a wedding. Tell us, what does the balance look like for you between, I have this really um, challenging goal that I know is going to take a lot of effort, time, and sacrifice, but at the same time, I'm now a wife. I want to have a social life. I want to be involved and have friends. What does that balance look like for you? Is it like 99% super focused, dialed in, wanting to achieve this goal, or is there a better balance? Like, what have you come to know and find that works for you?
I think it depends on the time of year.
Okay.
Um, so my husband, now Matt, he's also competitive. He was an Army Ranger, and so he works out at the gym with me, and we can share that time together, which makes it easier to have a little bit more blended of a balance. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
we get to share time together at the gym, whereas other couples might have to carve out gym time or carve out time together. We can kind of share ours, which is nice. But he jumped on as our coach for from semifinals to the games, and so he designated himself as coach and would come to practices and like keep our times and count our reps and make sure that we were set up and moving. And so it was helpful to have him as like a key person to be there. And then also he's really good with motivational speeches, and so he would just keep us upbeat and positive and laughing. So that was really helpful because while we were planning this wedding, we qualified for the games, and then we're do because we had the wedding at Matt's farm, and so it's not like we rented a venue. We were doing everything ourselves, and so the games was end of July, early August, and we got married the first weekend in October. So it was like, wow, we're in crunch time, and now like my athletic goals are here, and I want to do these big things, but also like my life goals are here too, and
Yeah.
so it was it was a lot to like train for the games and then also plan a wedding. Um, but it was great that Matt like threw himself in as our coach and like was there like every step of the way leading up with training and then traveling and everything. He's always a very prepared person. So that took a lot of the stress away from me to say, he had me with band-aids or he had me with Gatorades or whatever I needed. Like he was the guy to go to. So that was really helpful. But I think now at this stage, we've kind of moved past games and we're in that off season for CrossFit. And so it's a lot more relaxed schedule wise. Like I'm not necessarily getting up at 5 a.m. to make sure I'm doing every bit of cardio on this program for the day.
Mhm.
I'm picking and choosing. I'm doing a strength. I'm maybe doing two strengths because that's where I need the most help, and then getting a Metcon in. But as I would progress closer, like we're gonna get through the Waterpalooza qualifiers, and then unfortunately, it happens all right around the holidays.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so you have Thanksgiving and Christmas right before Wadapalooza, but I'll ramp up training and I'll make sure that, okay, yeah, I might be getting up at 5 a.m. to make sure I get my cardio in before coaching and then other job obligations, and then come back for a second session where I get my strength in. So training priorities shift throughout the year, depending upon what part of the season we're in and how close we are to competition, for sure.
Yeah. Something you said there that I resonate with is this idea of being flexible at different times of the year. I think sometimes we can get in this mindset of everything has to be perfect all the time to reach our goals. And if we get into that mentality, that can be really hard when things come up. We miss a training session, we're not feeling good, we feel like we're behind the eight ball, but having the ability to be flexible. Hey, today I might not get as much in as I need to, but I'm still moving the needle just a little bit towards my goals, and giving yourself some grace, if you will, along the way, and still realizing I can still get to the destination that I'm seeking. So I think that flexibility is a nice piece there that you highlighted.
Yeah, having that flexibility is huge, but also when you're in these moments of I don't want to train, can't find any motivation, you got to be able to like lean on the other people in your area.
Mm.
I'm lucky to have a great competitive group at Reignited, CrossFit Reignited, and we have so many competitors that just cycle through this gym over different years. But I mean, it's nice to go in and say, "Hey, Deb, Bryn, Ryan, Quinn, any of you guys, like, I need help today. So who's training at what time? And I'm going to try to go in with you." Um, I know not everybody has that kind of support system at their gym with super competitive athletes, but even they can jump into a class, jump in with people who will help push you when you can't find the motivation yourself.
Yeah. It's amazing. I think as we've seen in the CrossFit community, specifically the competitive one, more and more athletes seem to be moving to locations to train together because I think they're finding the same benefits that you just highlighted is that it can be really lonely and really tough to try and do it alone. So finding one other person who you can have as your accountability person to train with or a community like a gym, whether you're a competitive athlete seeking to go to the CrossFit Games or you're starting your fitness journey and just looking for a community to support you and get you excited to go to that hour class. I think that's just one of the biggest pieces that CrossFit or just finding a community in general can help us with. So I think that's a really great perspective that you have, and you realize how powerful that is for you and your experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Community is what sells CrossFit 100%.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, Steph, I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time. I know I taken away a lot from our conversation from the competitive athlete side, how you get yourself ready, some of the social intelligence things we talked about in the team environment, and then the idea of preparation, community, and it just is a lot of factors that really tie together to help you achieve your goals. So for anyone out there who's interested in following along with your journey, what's the best place that they can reach you, follow you, anything like that?
You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is SL Simmons 3. And then you can always reach out via email, stephanies@cfreignited.com.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to the next time we get a chance to cross paths. Once again, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. This was fun.